From his unintentionally successful union leadership to his aggressive assistant work, these are all the reasons Mr. Burns should have fired Homer Simpson. We're kicking off our list with an episode featuring Homer as an unintentional genius, leading a union strike against Burns without even trying. It's Last Exit to Springfield. The episode starts with Homer watching a movie with Bart and saying that nobody's really evil in real life. And that's when we cut all the way across town. Mr. Burns is cackling like a supervillain while casually ignoring a window washer dangling for his life. Anyway, Burns gets ticked off about the workers' union and decides to take revenge on the greedy workers by cutting their
teeth are coming in crooked. Has she been sucking on a pacifier?
I mean, who needs teeth anyway? Well, at the dentist, Lisa finds out she needs braces, and Homer is, of course, not concerned. They have the dental plan the union apparently fought for in the past. You know, that time Homer got injured in the dumbest ways possible? Yeah, it's hard to be more specific than that. Cut to the union meeting, where Carl reveals they're trading their dental plan for a keg of beer. Yeah, what a fantastic negotiation.
You know what I think of this contract? This!
It takes Homer forever to realize this is bad news. No dental plan means he's on the hook for Lisa's braces, so he panics, rants about the dental plan, and somehow gets elected union president. Typical Homer luck. Of course, Burns starts paying attention and thinks Homer is some kind of strategic genius, instead of, you know, an oblivious mess. Smithers has to remind Burns about every major Simpson family encounter, but Burns has no memory of Homer whatsoever. I mean, the guy is ancient. From there, Homer bumbles through everything as only Homer can. Burns tries bribing him, but Homer completely misunderstands the hints and bolts out of the office, horrified by what he thinks are Mr. Burns' clumsy attempts to, sleep with him. Then Lisa gets her braces, which, without insurance, are these horrific medieval torture devices that make her look like a total monster. And the whole time, Homer's union presidency goes from bad to worse. Burns gives him a tour of his mansion, and instead of negotiating, Homer's so distracted by needing the bathroom that Burns assumes Homer is playing hardball, another move by a strategic genius. Furious, Burns flies Homer home, threatens to crush him, and promptly falls out of the helicopter. Homer finally tries to quit as union president, but his incoherent speech gets misinterpreted, and suddenly the workers are on strike, a total disaster. Burns throws everything at them, goons, hoses, robot workers, and still fails every time. Desperate, he shuts off power to the whole town, but even that doesn't break their spirits.
We're going back to work!
Yup, singing Grinch style. Burns finally gives up. He agrees to reinstate the dental plan, but only if Homer resigns as president. Burns finally realizes Homer is an idiot, and Springfield gets his power back. Turns out that taking power from Homer is always a great idea. In the end, Lisa's braces are upgraded to fancy ones covered by insurance, and everyone laughs, mostly thanks to leftover laughing gas. It's a miracle Homer didn't ruin everything. Actually, Homer was surprisingly competent in this episode. The same cannot be said for this next episode, where his role as the new Smithers kicks off with a full-blown assault. It's Homer the Smithers. The episode opens with Employee Appreciation Night at a drag racing track, which Burns hates, because, you know, appreciating employees is really more of a poor man thing. But then Lenny drunkenly scares him at his limo window and hits something.
Smithers, what's happening?
I had a great time. I just want to shake your hand.
Smithers feels like a total failure for not defending Burns sooner. He's so hard on himself that he starts smashing his head against the steering wheel while driving and accidentally calls Burns on the limo phone. Smithers is clearly slacking in his job. The next morning, Smithers is still a wreck. He literally tries to drown himself in the water cooler after failing to anticipate Burns' needs. You know, stuff like laminating the newspaper so much Burns can't do the junior jumble. Burns finally tells him to take a vacation and insists he'll find someone else to fill in. Of course, Smithers picks Homer because who's more pathetic than Homer? Homer, trying his hardest to be an assistant, immediately proves he's awful at it. Genuinely terrible. Burns naturally ridicules him, but Homer snaps.
You're a travesty of a joke of an assistant.
Not a good way to start one's new career. Burns, now terrified of Homer, starts doing his own work just to keep Homer away. Weirdly, he actually likes it. By the time Smithers returns from vacation, Burns has become self-sufficient and fires him because he doesn't need an assistant anymore. Smithers is devastated by the news. Now Smithers and Homer team up to get his job back, which goes about as well as you'd expect. Their genius plan involves getting Burns' mother to call him and irritate him into rehiring Smithers. Well, that's plausible, I guess, but Homer unplugs the phone, ruins the plan, and decides to impersonate Burns' mom himself. Except he does the worst impression ever, calling Burns Mr. Burns and saying ridiculous things. Obviously, they get caught almost instantly. This escalates into Smithers and Homer brawling in Burns' office. Smithers even smacks Homer with a phone receiver to teach him how to use it. During their fight, they accidentally knock Burns out the window, which is, well, not a good thing for everybody, or is it? Burns ends up in physical therapy, totally dependent on Smithers again, and everything's back to normal.
Fellow who knocked me out the window. See that he gets what's coming to him.
I already have, sir.
What'd you get that for?
For knocking Mr. Burns out of a third-story window?
Makes sense to me.
I think that kind of says everything about Homer's attitude towards his job. This next episode, Homer Goes to College, highlights a pretty obvious reason Homer should not work for Burns. He doesn't have any qualifications, really. The episode begins as a group of Nuclear Regulatory Commission inspectors show up at the plant for a surprise evaluation. Smithers, quick on his feet, hides Homer and two other hopeless workers in the basement with the very important task of guarding a bee in a jar. Just one simple job. Naturally, Homer breaks the jar, the bee escapes, and Homer chases it all the way to the inspector's van, where it stings him in the butt and gives away his hiding spot. Okay, so somehow not that simple. The inspectors make Homer take a simulated test to prove his competence, and surprise, surprise, he causes a meltdown in the simulation van.
We're still not sure how he caused the meltdown. There wasn't any nuclear material in the truck.
Oh, very well. It's
So impressive, really. Burns tries bribery, trapdoors, you name it. Anything to try and get rid of the inspectors, but nothing works. They insist Homer go back to college to get some basic nuclear physics training, or they'll shut him down for good. Burns pulls some strings to get Homer into Springfield University. Kinda.
Excuse me, what are you doing?
I'm giving you the beating of your life.
Look,
And Homer immediately assumes it'll be like a college movie. Pranks, nerd bashing, and an uptight dean to torment. But the dean, Bobby Peterson, is super chill and nothing like the stuffy authority figure Homer expects. Homer still hates him anyway because, well, Homer's whole life is based on 80s movies. Homer proves himself to be the ultimate slacker, managing to somehow cause a classroom meltdown during a demonstration. The dean sends him for personal tutoring, where he meets Benjamin, Doug, and Gary, three stereotypical nerds who spend all day on their computers and quoting Monty Python. I feel strangely attacked that I relate to these guys. Homer decides these guys need to live a little and drags them into a series of ridiculous plans. A failed road trip to a petting zoo, and the kidnapping of Springfield A&M's mascot, Sir Oinks-a-Lot. Things go south when Homer gets the pig drunk, and the nerds get expelled, while Homer, of course, gets off scot-free. Feeling guilty, Homer lets the nerds crash at the Simpson house, but their nerdy habits, like hogging the phone line and ruining Bart's cartoons, drive the family nuts. Homer comes up with a ridiculous plan to get the nerds back into school, fake saving the dean by pushing him out of the way of Homer's speeding car. Okay, not a terrible plan, assuming you're okay with bad ideas. Naturally, the nerds overthink it.
Correct for wind resistance? Possibly. What do you think? Oh my.
Somehow, even when he's hospitalized, Peterson forgives everyone, and the nerds are reinstated. Homer crams for his final exam, but still fails. The nerds hack the system to give him an A, but Marge makes him retake the class the honest way. We get a little montage of Homer's ridiculous college antics: toga water skiing, food fights, fraternity hazing, and pulling pranks with the dean. And eventually, Homer graduates and proves, once again, that nothing can keep him down, not even his own incompetence. And don't be mistaken, Homer has more than enough incompetence. That's kind of the whole theme of this next episode, Homer Defined, where Homer's blind luck makes him a hero and humiliates Burns. So Homer's at work munching on jelly donuts like usual, when one of them splatters onto a control panel. Unbeknownst to him, the plant is seconds away from a meltdown. Now, you'd think someone working at a nuclear power plant would know what to do in this situation, but nope, Homer's got nothing.
Noise! Add noise!
5 minutes before critical mass.
Critical what? Okay, don't panic. Whatever problem this is, I'm sure they know how to handle it. Huh?
Turns out, during his job training, he was too busy messing with a Rubik's Cube to learn literally anything. In a panic, Homer decides to choose a button using Eeny, Meeny, Miny, Moe, and by some miracle, presses the one that saves the plant. Just like that, Homer's a hero. Meanwhile, Bart's world is falling apart because Milhouse's mom has decided he's a bad influence. Milhouse avoids Bart like the plague, leaving Bart totally friendless. He even resorts to hanging out with Maggie, which is a clear low point. How many conversations can you even have with a baby? Eventually, Marge steps in and pleads with Mrs. Van Houten, basically admitting that, yeah, Bart is a bad influence, but Milhouse is miserable without him. That's enough for Milhouse's mom to cave, and Bart celebrates by pulling out a BB gun at Milhouse's house. So, lesson learned? Not really. Back to Homer. Springfield is hailing him as Employee of the Month, which, let's be real, isn't exactly a high bar. He gets a ham, a black, a Magic Johnson phone call, and even Lisa starts to admire him. But Homer knows the truth. His heroic act was just dumb luck. His whole career was dumb luck, really. And when Mr. Burns forces him to give a motivational speech at the Shelbyville nuclear plant, things only get worse. Homer, clueless as ever, tries to inspire the workers, but mid-speech another meltdown starts. Naturally, everyone drags Homer to the control room to save the day again. Once more, Homer does his little eeny meeny routine and blindly presses a button.
All right. Eeny, meeny, miny, moe, catch a tiger by the toe. If he hollers, let him go. Eeny, meeny, miny, moe.
Crisis has been...
Now everyone realizes the truth. Homer is a complete idiot who succeeds purely by accident. He's no hero, he's a punchline. In fact, to pull a Homer becomes a phrase, meaning to succeed despite stupidity. It even gets added to the dictionary. But in the end, Lisa reassures Homer, saying he now belongs to the ages, which is sweet if you ignore how it all happened. Which is pretty much how every Homer success works out. Perfect example, Simpson and Delilah, in which Homer is actually good at his job thanks to someone else. Homer's sitting on the couch one night when he sees this ad for Demoxenil, a miracle hair restorer. It's expensive, $1,000, but Homer's desperation to ditch his baldness is real. Lenny has a bright idea: scam the company's health plan by creatively filling out some insurance forms. It's an idiot-proof plan. So Homer meets the doctor in a sketchy alley, buying Demoxenil like it's contraband. He slathers the stuff on his head, and the next morning, bam, he's got hair. Lots of it. Suddenly, Homer looks like a new man, with the tiny brain of the old man.
Good morning, everybody! Good morning, Springfield! Demoxenil!
At work, Mr. Burns, scouting for someone to promote, sees handsome Homer on the security monitors and decides this lush-haired wonder is going places. Homer gets the big promotion, but he's way out of his league. That's when he meets Carl, his new secretary. Carl is the ultimate wingman. He dresses Homer better, remembers Marge's anniversary for him, and even sends flowers and a singing telegram. He could turn Homer into a massive success. When Homer pitches his brilliant idea at a board meeting, giving workers more tartar sauce on fish stick days, Burns loves it. Productivity soars, accidents plummet, but only because Homer was the accident problem. No one notices though, and Burns hands Homer the key to the executive washroom. Smithers, of course, can't handle Homer's success. Burns starts bypassing him for Homer, like when Homer towels off Burns' hands. And that's the last straw. Smithers digs through the files, finds Homer's fraudulent Demoxenil charge, and pounces on the opportunity to destroy him. Right before Homer's big executive speech, Smithers confronts him. Carl, ever loyal, takes the fall, claiming the scam was his idea. Carl's fired and Homer's left on his own, and in big trouble. To make matters worse, Bart spills the Demoxenil, and Homer wakes up bald again. Carl shows up with a prepped speech, but Homer panics.
I haven't taught you anything.
What do you mean?
Don't you see? The tartar sauce, the bathroom key, drying your boss's hands. You did it all. It was never the hair. You did it because you believed you could, and you still can.
No, I can't. I'm just a big fool.
Inspired, Homer delivers a solid speech about saving money with Japanese self-management techniques. But the executives, they just see a bald guy. One by one, they walk out. Apparently, business is only for the two paid. Homer gets chewed out by by Burns, but surprisingly not fired. Burns, bald himself, sympathizes and gives Homer his old job back. Homer's crushed, feeling like a failure, but Marge saves the day. She reminds him that the hair doesn't matter. He's always provided for the family, and they love him, bald head and all. The episode ends with Marge sweetly singing, "You Are So Beautiful," proving Homer's hair was never what made him lovable. It didn't make him all that competent either. This next episode, Blood Feud, shows Homer at his worst, attempting to manipulate Burns into giving him something big in exchange for, well, keeping him alive. So the episode opens with Mr. Burns getting sick, like really sick. He's got hypohemia, which is a fancy way of saying he doesn't have enough blood to stay alive. Yeah, I would say that counts as a pretty serious problem. Naturally, Smithers freaks out and begs the employees for a 00 negative blood donor to save Burns' life. And of course, Homer volunteers immediately because he assumes Burns will shower him with money and riches for saving his life, which I think we can all agree is a very noble reason to give blood. The only problem, Homer doesn't have the right blood type. Neither does Marge, Lisa, or Grandpa.
Woo! Yes! All right! Woo! Congratulations, boy! You've got a date with an...
Unfortunately, Bart doesn't want to give Burns his blood, but Homer, ever the motivational speaker, tells him rich people reward you big time for saving their lives. Now that's good parenting. Marge, on the other hand, tries the whole "it's the right thing to do" angle, which, well, I guess it works. Eventually, Bart agrees and donates his blood. Sure enough, Burns is back to his old self in no time, strutting around with more energy than ever, and even starting to write his autobiography. And what does Homer get for all this?
Right, there's no check, just a card. But don't panic, I'm sure it tells us what we're getting and where we can pick it up. Dear Bart, thank you kindly for the blood. Yours truly, Montgomery Burns. Oh,
Yup, that's it. A billionaire who sends out nothing more than a flimsy, cheap thank you card. Homer loses his mind, absolutely furious that Burns didn't come through with money, cars, or maybe even a solid gold house. He scribbles out this brutal, rage-fueled letter calling Burns out for being an ungrateful jerk. And, you know, it's not the most friendly, supportive thing ever put on paper. Marge, of course, steps in with her usual common sense and stops him from mailing it. Crisis averted. Or so Homer thinks. The next morning, Homer realizes the letter is gone. Turns out Bart, trying to be helpful, already mailed it. Cue Homer's frantic attempts to stop the letter from reaching Burns, which naturally all fail spectacularly. Burns has the letter.
You need girl arms, and you smell like an elephant's butt.
Burns swears revenge on Homer, signing his pink slip and even suggesting Smithers have Homer beaten up. But Smithers refuses, reminding Burns that Homer did save his life. Damn, for once, one of Homer's schemes has actually protected him. Burns has a rare moment of self-awareness and decides to make it right, sending the Simpsons a thank you gift in the form of a massive, bizarre Olmec Indian head statue. Bart thinks it's cool, but Homer, on the other hand, feels ripped off again, since it's definitely not the fortune he imagined. I mean, it's not exactly a car or a gold house. The family tries to figure out the moral of the story, but comes up empty. There's not really any lesson at all since, you know, nobody got anything but a giant antique sculpture out of their good deed. In the end, they agree it's just been a big wild ride, and it's all thanks to Bart's 00 negative. Homer expects a lot of Mr. Burns, but Burns has his own expectations of his worst employee. In Mountain of Madness, the two of them get stuck in a serious life and death situation. The episode opens with Mr. Burns deciding that the power plant needs a fire drill to spice things up, but it all goes horribly wrong, mostly thanks to Homer. Who else? While everyone else is panicking and fleeing, Homer just parks a bench in front of the fire exit like an absolute moron. It takes the workers 15 minutes to clear out instead of 45 seconds, and the building is basically destroyed in the process. When Homer cluelessly asks if he won, Burns delivers a super ominous line.
Yes, you won, all right. You won more than you bargained for.
I'm not sure he can actually interpret it in any other way. Burns, furious, announces a teamwork challenge at Mount Useful to whip all of his useless employees into shape. The goal? Hike up a mountain to a cabin. The last team to arrive gets fired. Well, at least the stakes are there, I guess. Homer somehow gets partnered with Burns while Smithers is stuck going solo and absolutely loses it, wishing he could kick Burns in his bony old behind. Yeah, when Smithers turns on Burns, you know that it's really not good. Homer brings the whole family along for the event, much to Burns' irritation, so Marge and the kids hang back while Homer and Burns set off on the adventure. Almost immediately, Burns convinces Homer to cheat by taking a snowmobile to the cabin, which really should have been their first idea, honestly. Why make the effort to hike when you could just get a free ride? The two of them arrive at the cabin hours early, pop some champagne, and accidentally trigger an avalanche that buries the entire cabin. Trapped under a mountain of snow, they try everything. Homer digs tunnels, and Burns works a telegraph machine, but their constant talking just causes more avalanches. It's hopeless. It seems like they aren't gonna make it out of this thing alive. Meanwhile, Bart and Lisa run into Smithers and help him up the mountain, which mostly means they slow him down. That is the Simpsons way, after all. Back in the cabin, Homer and Burns lose it. Burns insists they build a snowman to pass the time, but he will only make real men with actual clothes, leaving them both freezing. Slowly, cabin fever sets in, and they start staring each other down, full-on paranoid. No teamwork here. It all escalates into an epic fight, ending with Burns accidentally blowing up the propane tank. The explosion launches the cabin out of the snow and straight down the mountain, horrifying the other employees. When the cabin finally stops, Burns reminds everyone of the contest. Lenny's the last one inside, so Burns fires him until he changes his mind and decides no one will be fired after all. Dang, that's a surprisingly heartwarming decision by Burns. The episode wraps up with Homer and Burns laughing, then frowning, then laughing again. Honestly, Homer's teamwork was a disaster, but somehow everyone survived. Unfortunately, we can't say that about this next one. Homer's enemy is all about showing what happens when Homer meets a regular person, but it's also a clear showcase of why Burns should fire the guy. Frank Grimes, or hardworking, self-made Frank Grimes, walks into the Springfield nuclear power plant and right into Homer Simpson's frankly baffling orbit of incompetence. Grimes, or Grimy as Homer cluelessly calls him, is a guy who's struggled for everything. No parents, no breaks, just pure grit to survive. He's a seriously hard worker. Naturally, he takes one look at Homer, lazy, underqualified, and somehow still coasting through life with a good job, a beautiful family, and absurd accomplishments, and immediately hates him. Fair enough, honestly. I don't think any of us truly understand how Homer got where he is. From the get-go, Homer's stupidity tests Grimes' patience. Homer nearly drinks sulfuric acid, forcing Grimes to save him, but then Grimes gets blamed for the resulting mess.
Who did this to my wool?
He did.
Burns even docks Grimes' pay because Homer, of course, points him out as the culprit. Furious, Grimes confronts Homer and declares they're enemies, but Homer's too oblivious to take it seriously. At most, Homer decides the solution is to invite Grimes over for dinner, because food fixes everything, right? Grimes arrives, sees the dream life Homer has, and snaps. A house, 2 cars, lobster for dinner, a son who owns a factory, and Homer Simpson of all people, has been to space, won a Grammy, and partied with a former president. Grimes, who lives in a sad little room above 2 bowling alleys, just can't take it. He storms out, ranting that guys like Homer are what's wrong with America. The next day, Homer tries and fails to act more professionally, but Grimes has had it. He vents to Lenny and Carl, listing all of Homer's disasters, but they shrug it off. Nobody but Grimes takes Homer's incompetence seriously. Frustrated, Grimes decides to humiliate Homer once and for all. He tricks him into entering a kids contest to design a power plant, expecting Homer to embarrass himself, but Homer, oblivious as ever, shows up with a crude diorama complete with fins and racing stripes, and Mr. Burns loves it. Homer wins first prize and a standing ovation. His stupidity is rewarded without hesitation. Grimes, horrified, snaps completely. In a psychotic frenzy, Grimes mocks Homer by becoming him, eating like a slob, mocking safety rules, and declaring, "I'm Homer Simpson." Then, in a final act of madness, he spots a high-voltage cable.
My mansion and eat my lobster! What's this? Extremely high voltage. Well, I don't need safety gloves because I'm Homer Simpson.
Turns out, he wasn't Homer Simpson after all. At his funeral, Homer, blissfully unaware, snores in the pews, mumbles about changing the TV channel, and makes everyone laugh. And just like that, Grimes' tragic life is totally overshadowed by Homer's unshakable mediocrity. But Burns will never fire Homer because, apparently, it wouldn't benefit him financially. Burns verkaufen die Kraftwerk sees Burns selling the plant, only to buy it back after Homer, well, disrespects him. So Homer finds out out he owns stock in the new power plant, 100 shares to be exact. He's immediately lured into selling them for a measly 25 cents a share, walking away with a whopping $25. To be fair, that's probably still more than he usually has. Naturally, Homer spends it on an expensive beer because, well, that's Homer. But as luck or bad luck would have it, the stock value skyrockets later that day, ending at $52 per share. Suddenly, Homer is full of regret as he realizes he missed out on $5,200. Everyone else at the plant who held onto their stock is currently rolling in cash, buying fancy cars, living it up. Lenny even gets a facelift. He doesn't look any better than usual. Meanwhile, Homer sits there sulking, realizing he's traded his golden ticket for a single beer. The family's disappointment in his decision stings. He has failed them. Turns out the stock boom happened because Mr. Burns decided to sell the plant to two German businessmen, Hans and Fritz, for $100 million. These guys are all about efficiency, so they start evaluating the plant and its employees. Homer's big moment comes when they interview him, but instead of giving coherent answers, his brain drifts into the land of chocolate, an insanely vivid daydream I wish I had. Unsurprisingly, Homer gets laid off. Homer, now unemployed, wanders around the house feeling sorry for himself, muttering about his safety-conscious work ethic while jabbing a fork into a plugged-in toaster. Real safety hero, right? Makes you wonder how the plant will function without him. Meanwhile, Mr. Burns isn't exactly thriving in retirement either. He's bored, miserable, and ends up at Moe's Tavern, where he runs into Homer. Burns tries to play it cool, but Homer is still stewing about losing his job, grills him about whether his money makes him happy or loved. When Burns admits money doesn't bring love, the barflies pounce.
Na 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 na. Way.
Burns is humiliated, realizing his power was tied to the plant. He has to get it back. Luckily for him, Hans and Fritz are horrified by how much it'll cost to bring the plant up to code. Another $100 million. Smelling their desperation, Burns swoops in with a lowball offer of $50 million, and they have no choice but to take it. Burns reclaims his throne, immediately ordering Smithers to rehire Homer, which is a surprising turnaround for a guy who seems indifferent at best to Homer's antics. Smithers reminds Burns that Homer humiliated him, but Burns has a plan.
But why?
Smithers, I keep my friends close, and my enemies even closer.
Homer will work for him for a long time, blissfully unaware of the sword of Damocles dangling over his head. Back at home, Homer happily announces he's got his job back, completely clueless as usual. That guy is gonna die at the plant for sure, or in a hospital bed because of Burns. That's what happens in The Old Man and the Lisa, when Burns' bad investments leave him at the whim of the Simpsons. So Lisa's on a mission to save the environment, collecting recyclables for a school project that's supposed to fund a trip to Albany. At the kickoff assembly, Mr. Burns gives a speech about success, but when Lisa asks about recycling, he's disgusted. Why would he ever do something that would benefit other people? Even worse, Lisa points out that his net worth isn't quite what he thinks. Burns panic checks his stocks, starting from before the Great Depression. Turns out he's broke, like super broke, and blames Smithers for not warning him about the market crash 70 years ago. You know, before Smithers was born. To fix his finances, Burns makes some seriously bad investments. Zeppelins, inflammable powders, hay, and hats. Unsurprisingly, he loses everything. The bank forecloses on his mansion, and the power plant gets handed over to Lenny. Yup, Homer's still employed, but now he's working under Lenny Leonard. Somehow that feels worse. Meanwhile, Lisa's recycling efforts are not going well. After tons of work, they make 75 cents. Skinner, furious, cancels the Albany trip and accidentally kills a tree by backing into it. So, seems like everything is going well there too. Burns, now broke and pathetic, bounces between Smithers' apartment and the retirement castle after a grocery store incident involving ketchup and catsup. Desperate, he begs Lisa for help, but she's not exactly sympathetic. Burns is the worst person in the world after all, but after much pestering, Lisa agrees to help him, on the condition that he changes ways for good. Together, they start making money recycling cans, and soon Burns opens the little Lisa recycling plant. Lisa's thrilled. Maybe Burns really has reformed. Maybe there's hope after all. Nope, turns out the plant's crowning achievement is a massive net made of six-pack rings that drag sea creatures out of the ocean, turning them into animal slurry. Burns is delighted by this alleges gross animal abuse, but Lisa's horrified. When she calls him out for being worse than ever, Burns doesn't care because everyone else in town is obsessed with recycling. Brainwashed, basically. He just wants profit. Back home, Lisa's visited by Burns, who smugly announces he's selling the plans for $120 million. He even offers Lisa 10%, a cool $12 million. Lisa, horrified at the money's origins, rips the check in half. Homer, meanwhile, has 4 simultaneous heart attacks because $12,000 would have been life-changing.
Dad, 10% of $120 million isn't $12,000. It's...
Code blue. Code blue.
Yikes.